Lena sat in the small claims courtroom with a black three-ring binder on the table in front of her, and the woman who had once been the love of her life had no idea the dog was already dead. The courtroom was nearly empty. Just Lena, her sister Marisol in the gallery, and a bailiff scrolling through his phone near the door. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, the kind of sound that makes a room feel like it's holding its breath. Lena had dressed carefully that morning, not for sympathy, but for stillness. Dark jeans, a plain blouse, her hair pulled back in a way that said she was here to present facts, not feelings. She'd been waiting for this day for almost 3 months. When Tanya walked in, she looked good. That was the first thing Lena noticed, and she hated that she noticed it. Tanya had always known how to enter a room, shoulders back, chin up, the slight smile of someone who assumed she was about to be treated fairly because she'd never given anyone a reason not to. She was wearing the blazer Lena had bought her for a job interview 3 years ago, which felt like either carelessness or a message, and Lena couldn't decide which was worse. Tanya didn't look at the binder. She walked past Lena's table without meeting her eyes and sat down on the other side of the aisle, next to a woman Lena didn't recognize. A friend, maybe, or a new partner. Someone who'd been told a version of this story that Lena hadn't been invited to correct. Here is what Tanya believed was about to happen. She was going to stand in front of a judge and argue that she deserved shared custody of a dog named Rufus, a rescue mutt with one ear that flopped sideways and a habit of sleeping on the pillow next to Lena's head. She believed she was about to win, or at least make Lena's life difficult, or at the very least force a conversation Lena had been refusing to have for over a year. Here is what Tanya did not know. Rufus had been dead for 4 months, and everything Lena had done since the day Tanya filed the suit, every document she'd gathered, every receipt she'd saved, every text message she'd printed and placed in that binder, had been building toward the moment Tanya finally understood what she'd done. But to understand that, you need to understand Rufus. And to understand Rufus, you need to understand Lena and Tanya. Not the version of them that ended up in a courtroom, but the version that started in a shelter on a Saturday morning 6 years ago, when a dog with one sideways ear pressed his head against the cage door, and a woman who didn't yet know she was about to lose everything fell in love with him first. Tanya was the one who said they should adopt him together. She was the one who knelt down in the concrete hallway and let Rufus lick her face while Lena filled out the paperwork. She was the one who said, "We're his family now," and meant it. Or seemed to mean it. Or meant it in the way people mean things when they still believe they're going to be the person they promised to be. At the time, Lena and Tanya had been together for 4 years. They'd moved in together after 2, survived a cross-country relocation, weathered Tanya's mother's long, slow thaw from disapproval into something like tolerance. They'd talked about marriage in the abstract, the way couples do when they're not quite ready to say it directly. When we have a yard, when we're both in the same place financially, when the timing is right. Rufus was supposed to be the bridge between someday and now. The first thing they built together that had a heartbeat. For the first 3 years, it worked. Rufus was the center of their small, quiet world. The reason they came home early from parties. The subject of hundreds of photos neither of them posted, but both of them kept. When Tanya had a bad day at work, Rufus would rest his head on her knee and sigh, as if absorbing her stress into his own small body. When Lena couldn't sleep, Rufus would follow her to the couch and curl up against her side, warm and steady, asking for nothing. He was a good dog. Not remarkable. He wasn't going to save anyone from a burning building or learn to open the refrigerator, but good in the way that matters most. He paid attention. He stayed close. He loved the people who loved him with an uncomplicated devotion that made the rest of life feel simpler than it was.
And then Tanya left. It happened the way these things often happen. Not in a single explosion, but in a slow, confusing erosion. Tanya started staying late at work. She started being vague about who she was texting. She started looking at Lena the way someone looks at a bill they've already decided they don't want to pay. with a kind of weary, guilt-tinged resentment that had nowhere to go because Lena hadn't actually done anything wrong. When Tanya finally said the words, "I need space. I need to figure myself out. This isn't about you." She said them while standing in the doorway of their apartment with a bag already packed, and she did not look at Rufus. She did not look at him when she walked out. Rufus sat by the door for 3 weeks. Lena would come home from work and find him there, his head resting on his paws, his one sideways ear pricked toward the hallway, like he was waiting for a sound he recognized. She tried everything. Longer walks, new treats, letting him sleep in the bed, even though he'd been crate-trained for years. Nothing worked. He wasn't destructive or frantic. He was just waiting. Quietly, patiently, in the way dogs do. Because dogs don't understand that sometimes people leave and mean it. And Tanya? Tanya did not come back to see him. She texted once, about a month after she left. "How's Rufus?" Lena stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "He misses you." Tanya responded with a heart emoji and never asked again. That was the year Rufus got sick. It started small. He was drinking more water than usual. Then he stopped finishing his food. Then Lena noticed he was losing weight, his ribs becoming visible beneath his fur, in a way that made her stomach drop the first time she really looked. The vet ran tests, then more tests, then the kind of tests that require a referral to a specialist an hour away, and the specialist used words Lena had to write down so she could look them up later. And what she learned was that Rufus's body was slowly failing him in a way that could be managed, but not cured. The treatment was expensive. Lena didn't hesitate. She drained her savings first. Then she sold her grandmother's sewing machine, the one thing she'd inherited that had any real value. Then she started a GoFundMe she was too proud to share widely. And when it raised less than $400, she covered the rest with a credit card she knew she'd be paying off for years. She did not call Tanya. Tanya had made it clear, through silence, through absence, through the new photos that started appearing on her Instagram, of brunches and hikes, and a woman with a sharp blonde bob who smiled at the camera like she'd won something, that she was not coming back. But 4 months ago, when the vet told Lena there was nothing left to try, that Rufus was in pain, and the kindest thing was also the hardest, Lena sat on the cold floor of the examination room, with Rufus's head in her lap, and whispered to him for an hour. She told him he was a good boy. She told him she was sorry. She told him he'd been the best part of a life she'd thought she was building with someone else, and that having him had made all of it worth it, even the parts that broke her heart, even the parts she still couldn't think about without her chest getting tight. And when he took his last breath, his one sideways ear was still tilted toward the door. Lena buried him in her parents' backyard, under the oak tree where she'd played as a child. She wrapped him in his favorite blanket, the one with the foxes on it, and her brother dug the hole, and her mother made tea. And nobody said Tanya's name out loud, because nobody had to. That was 4 months ago. The custody suit arrived 3 weeks after the funeral. Lena opened the envelope standing in her kitchen, still wearing the old hoodie she'd been living in since Rufus died, and read the words, "Shared custody of Rufus, jointly adopted property," with a kind of numbness that felt, in retrospect, like her brain refusing to process something that made no sense. Tanya was suing her. For a dog. For a dog she had not seen in almost a year. For a dog she had not asked about in months. For a dog who was already dead, buried in a backyard 40 miles away under an oak tree Tanya had never seen. And instead of calling Tanya and telling her the truth, Lena did something else. She opened a new binder. She started printing documents. She called the vet and requested every record, every invoice, every note in Rufus's file. She found the text messages, the ones from the months when she'd been begging Tanya to help with vet bills, to come see him, to at least pretend she still cared. And she printed those too. Because here is what Lena understood, in that moment in her kitchen with the court summons in her hand. Tanya had written a story in which she was still Rufus's other parent. She'd told herself a version of events in which she'd done nothing wrong, in which Lena had taken the dog and pushed her out, in which she was the wronged party, deserving of a judge's sympathy. And she was so confident in that story, so certain of her own version of reality, that she had filed a lawsuit without ever checking to see if the dog was still alive. Lena didn't correct her. She just kept building the binder. The binder started as grief, but it became something else. Lena didn't plan to build a case. At first, she just needed to do something with her hands, something that felt productive, something to fill the hours she used to spend walking Rufus, or preparing his food, or sitting on the floor beside his bed while he slept. The silence in her apartment was unbearable. The summons gave her a project. She started with the vet records because the vet records were factual, and facts felt safe. She called the specialist's office and asked for a complete printout, every visit, every test, every medication prescribed over the 18 months of Rufus's illness. When the envelope arrived, thick as a paperback novel, she spread the pages across her kitchen table and organized them by date, oldest to most recent. She highlighted the diagnosis. She highlighted the treatment plan. She highlighted the line on the final page that read, "Euthanasia, performed in clinical, unsentimental type," because seeing it in black and white made it real in a way her memory alone couldn't. Then she found the receipts. There were so many of them. The emergency vet visit on a Tuesday night when Rufus wouldn't stop trembling, $460. The ultrasound that confirmed the diagnosis, $820. The monthly medication that arrived in a refrigerated package every 3 weeks, $130 per shipment, times 14 shipments. The special food, the supplements, the acupuncture treatments she tried because someone on a support forum swore by them, and Lena was willing to try anything. She totaled it up on a yellow legal pad, and the final number made her sit down slowly in a chair and stare at the wall for a long time. She hadn't kept the receipts because she planned to show anyone. She'd kept them because she was a person who kept receipts. The kind of person who filed things, who saved confirmation emails, who wanted a record. It was the same instinct that had made her save every text message Tanya had sent since the breakup, even the ones that stung. She wasn't thinking about court. She was thinking, I might need to remember this later. I might need to prove to myself that it happened. And now she had a binder, and the binder was growing. The text messages came next. Lena scrolled back through their conversation history. 2 years of messages, stretching from the months before Tanya left to the weeks after Rufus died. She read them with fresh eyes, the way you might read a transcript of a conversation you only half remembered. And what she found made her hands shake. There were the early messages, from right after Tanya moved out. Lena had sent photos of Rufus, his sideways ear, his sleeping face, a video of him chasing a squirrel in the park. And Tanya had responded with one-word answers. Cute, sweet, miss him. But she never asked to see him. She never offered to take him for a weekend. She never sent money. Then came the messages from when Rufus got sick. Lena had written, "The vet says it's serious. Treatment is going to be expensive. Can you help?" Tanya's response, after 2 days of silence, "I'm tight right now. You know I would if I could." Then, in the same thread, 3 days later, a photo of her and the blonde woman at a restaurant,
with a $40 entree in the foreground. Lena printed that one twice. There were more. The message where Tanya said she'd think about contributing to the surgery fund, then never mentioned it again. The message where Lena asked if Tanya wanted to say goodbye before the procedure, and Tanya left her on read. The final message, sent 2 days after Rufus died, where Lena simply wrote, "He's gone." And Tanya responded with a single line, "I'm sorry to hear that. Are you okay? Are you okay?" Like Rufus had been a distant acquaintance. Like Lena had lost a houseplant. Lena put that message at the very front of the binder, because if the judge only read one thing, she wanted it to be that. But she didn't call Tanya and tell her the truth. She didn't write back and say, "Why are you suing me for custody of a dog you didn't even mourn?" She didn't do any of the things a reasonable person might do to stop a lawsuit from moving forward. Instead, she waited. And as the court date approached, Lena kept adding to the binder. Not just the vet records and the receipts and the texts, but character statements from her neighbors who'd watched her walk Rufus every morning, a letter from her mother about the day of the burial, a notarized affidavit from the specialist who'd overseen Rufus's treatment plan. She walked into that courtroom with a binder that weighed almost 4 pounds, and she did not feel nervous. She felt ready. Here is what Tanya had filed: a petition for shared custody of Rufus, a mixed-breed dog adopted jointly on or about March 14, 2019. She'd attached a single piece of evidence, the original adoption paperwork from the shelter, with both of their names on it. She'd written a statement saying Lena had unreasonably denied access to their shared pet, and that she, Tanya, had maintained a continuous emotional bond with Rufus and had consistently contributed to his care. Lena read that line, consistently contributed to his care, and for the first time in months, she felt something that wasn't sadness. And that detail, the one Tanya thought would win her the case, is the one that makes everything else make sense. Because when you look at the adoption papers, Tanya's name is on them, that's true. But when you look at every single vet bill, every medication receipt, every payment to the specialist, Tanya's name is nowhere. When you look at the text messages, Tanya's contributions are one-word answers and silence. When you look at the final year of Rufus's life, Tanya was not just absent. She was actively choosing to stay absent every single day, while Lena drained her savings and sold her grandmother's sewing machine and held Rufus through nights when he couldn't stop shaking. Tanya didn't know any of this. She hadn't asked. She had walked into a courtroom with a piece of paper from 6 years ago and assumed it was enough, that the story she told herself was the one that would hold up under scrutiny. She had no idea what was in the binder. The judge was a woman in her late 50s named Judge Okonkwo, and she did not look impressed to be here. Lena watched her flip through the case file with the expression of someone who had presided over actual crimes, assaults, frauds, custody battles over actual children, and was now being asked to adjudicate a dispute about a dog. Her reading glasses sat low on her nose. Her mouth was a flat, unreadable line. When she looked up at the two women standing on opposite sides of the aisle, there was something in her gaze that said, "You are both adults. Explain yourselves." Tanya went first. She stood up. No lawyer, she'd filed everything herself, and smoothed down the front of her blazer, the one Lena had bought her. She spoke with the practiced ease of someone who'd rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror, or perhaps in front of the blonde woman with the sharp bob, who was sitting in the gallery now with her arms crossed and her expression carefully neutral. "Your Honor," Tanya said, "I'm here because Lena has been keeping Rufus from me for over a year. We adopted him together. We raised him together. He's as much my dog as hers, and I have the original adoption paperwork to prove it." She held up the paper. She'd put it in a plastic sleeve, Lena noticed, as if that made it more official. "I've tried to be reasonable," Tanya continued. "I've asked to see him. I've asked to work out a schedule. Lena just won't respond.
She won't cooperate. I didn't want to take this to court, but she's given me no other choice." Lena did not react. She sat with her hands folded on top of the binder, her face still and calm, while Tanya told a story that was technically true in the same way a movie poster is technically the film. Selective, flattened, missing every scene that would change the meaning of what you were seeing. The adoption paper was real. Their names were both on it. Tanya had, in fact, texted about seeing Rufus, twice in the first month after she left, before she stopped asking entirely. She had, in a very narrow sense, tried. But the story she was telling was missing all the other texts. It was missing the months of silence. It was missing the vet bills, the medication receipts, the nights Lena had slept on the floor next to Rufus's bed because he cried when she left the room. It was missing the part where Tanya had been invited, repeatedly, explicitly, to say goodbye before the end, and had left Lena on red. And it was missing the most important fact of all. "Ms. Okonkwo," Tanya started. "Judge Okonkwo," the judge corrected without looking up. "Judge Okonkwo, I'm just asking for what's fair. Shared custody. I'm not trying to take him from Lena. I just want to see my dog." The judge turned to Lena. "Ms. Vasquez, do you have a response?" Lena stood up. She picked up the binder. "Your Honor," she said, "I do. But before I present my evidence, I need to tell the court something that that Tanya apparently doesn't know." She paused. She looked directly at Tanya for the first time since the proceedings began. "Rufus is dead." The word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Tanya's face went through 3 expressions in quick succession: confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked almost like fear. Her mouth opened and closed. The woman with the blonde bob uncrossed her arms. "Rufus died 4 months ago," Lena continued, her voice steady. "He had a degenerative condition that we diagnosed a 1.5 years ago. I spent over $11,000 on his treatment. My savings, the money from selling my grandmother's sewing machine, a credit card I'm still paying off. I have every receipt. I have every vet record. I have the specialist's notes and the final procedure report, and a letter from the veterinarian who held his head while I said goodbye." She placed the binder on the table in front of her. Tanya contributed nothing. She did not visit him. She did not call the vet. She did not send $1 toward his care, despite multiple requests. I have all of that documented too. Tanya took a step back from her table. You never told me he was—" "I told you he was sick," Lena said quietly. "I told you the treatment was expensive. I told you I needed help. You said you were tight on money. Then you posted photos of yourself at a $40 a plate restaurant." Judge Okonkwo removed her glasses. "Ms. Vasquez, let me see what you have." Lena opened the binder. The first thing she presented was the final vet report, the one that documented Rufus's diagnosis, his treatment plan, and his death. She handed a copy to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Okonkwo read it in silence, her expression unchanged. Then she looked up at Tanya. "Did you know this dog was ill?" Tanya's voice was smaller now. She mentioned something, but I didn't think it was... She never said it was terminal." "Did you contribute financially to his care? In any amount?" A long pause. "No, but I didn't know how bad it was." Lena pulled out the text messages, the ones she'd printed and organized by date, oldest to most recent. The one where she'd written, "Treatment is going to be expensive. Can you help?" The one where Tanya had replied, "I'm tight right now." The one where Lena had asked if Tanya wanted to see Rufus before the end, left on red. Judge Okonkwo read through them slowly. The courtroom was so quiet, Lena could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. "Ms. Ocon," the judge said, and her tone had shifted. Still professional, but with an edge of something colder underneath. "You filed this suit 3 weeks ago, correct?"
Yes, Your Honor.
At that point, had you spoken to Ms. Vasquez in the preceding month?
We weren't in regular contact, but...
Had you seen the dog?
No, but...
Had you asked about the dog?
Tanya didn't answer.
"That's all right," Judge Okonkwo said. "I think I have enough." She turned to Lena, and the expression on her face was not quite soft, not warm, but it was something close to respect.
"I've read enough," she said. "I'm dismissing this case with prejudice. Ms. Ocon, you filed a custody suit for a dog you had not seen, cared for, or supported in over a year. A dog you did not even know was deceased. This is not a custody dispute. This is harassment." And that's when Lena did something no one expected. She reached into the back of the binder and pulled out a final document, one she hadn't shown the judge, one she'd kept for herself. It was an invoice, not from the vet, from the cremation service Tanya had never known about, because Lena had told everyone there was no service at all. But she'd had Rufus privately cremated, and she'd kept the ashes in a small wooden box on her bookshelf, and the invoice had a line item that made her stomach clench every time she read it. Weight upon intake, 18.4 pounds. "He was so small by the end," Lena said. "You would have been shocked." And she sat back down. The hallway outside the courtroom was empty except for the 3 of them. Lena walked out first, the binder tucked under her arm, her sister Marisol falling into step beside her. Neither of them spoke. The sound of Marisol's heels on the linoleum was the only thing marking time. Then the door swung open behind them, and Tanya's voice cut through the quiet. "Lena!" Not a question, not a plea, a demand. The kind of demand you make when you still believe you're entitled to something, even after a judge has just told you otherwise. Lena stopped walking. She didn't turn around right away. She looked at Marisol, who raised her eyebrows in a silent question. "Do you want me to stay or go?" And Lena shook her head once. Marisol squeezed her arm and walked toward the elevators. Then Lena turned. Tanya was standing in the middle of the hallway with the blazer Lena had bought her 3 years ago, and her mascara was smudging at the corners. The blonde woman was a few feet behind her, arms still crossed, face unreadable, but her posture had shifted. She was standing slightly farther away from Tanya than she had been in the courtroom. Like her body had made a decision her mind hadn't caught up to yet. "You humiliated me," Tanya said. Her voice was shaking, but not with sadness. "You sat there with your binder and your receipts, and you made me look like a monster in front of a judge. You could have just told me he was gone. You could have called me." Lena looked at her for a long moment. "I did call you," she said quietly. "I texted you. I sent you photos. I sent you vet updates. I asked you for help. I asked you to come see him. I asked you to say goodbye." She paused. "You left me on red." "That's not... You're twisting things." "I printed it out, Tanya. It's in the binder." The blonde woman shifted her weight. She was looking at Tanya now, not at Lena, and the expression on her face was one Lena recognized. It was the look of someone running calculations, subtracting one version of events from another, trying to figure out what was true. "You didn't even know he was dead," Lena continued, and her voice wasn't cruel. It was almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "You filed a lawsuit. You stood in front of a judge. You talked about your continuous emotional bond with a dog you hadn't asked about in months. You didn't know he'd been sick. You didn't know I'd spent every dollar I had trying to save him. You didn't know he was buried under my parents' oak tree. You didn't know any of it because you never asked." "I thought..." Tanya's voice cracked. "I thought you were keeping him from me."
"You thought what you needed to think," Lena said. "You told yourself a story where I was the unreasonable one, because the alternative was admitting you'd walked away from us, from him, and never looked back. That's not my fault. That was never my fault." Tanya opened her mouth and nothing came out. The blonde woman uncrossed her arms. She looked at Tanya. "You told me she took him," she said, her voice flat. "You told me you'd been trying to see him for months." Tanya didn't answer. "That's what I thought," the woman said, and she walked past Tanya without touching her, toward the elevators. She did not look back. And then it was just the two of them in the hallway, and the fluorescent lights were humming, and Tanya's face was doing something complicated. Anger collapsing into something raw, something that almost looked like grief, but wasn't quite.
"I loved him too," Tanya whispered.
Lena looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment she saw the person she'd fallen in love with 6 years ago. The person who'd knelt on the shelter floor and let Rufus lick her face. The person who'd said, "We're his family now," and meant it. Or thought she meant it. Or meant the version of it that didn't require showing up when it was hard. "Maybe," Lena said. "But love isn't a feeling you carry around in your chest. It's what you do. It's the vet visits. It's the nights on the floor. It's the money you don't have that you find anyway because there's no version of the world where you let him suffer alone." She paused. "You didn't do any of that. You weren't there. And you don't get to rewrite that now because the truth is embarrassing." Tanya's face crumpled. And here is what's strange. Lena didn't feel satisfied. She'd thought she would. For months, as she'd assembled the binder, she'd imagined this moment as a kind of release, the reckoning, the vindication, the moment Tanya finally understood what she'd done. But standing in that hallway, watching Tanya's composure dissolve, Lena felt something quieter. Not pity exactly, not forgiveness, more like the absence of the need to be understood by this person anymore. She had spent months building a case, and now the case was over. But she still had the binder. And as she turned to walk away, Tanya said one more thing. Something that made Lena stop in her tracks. Something that revealed the story Tanya had been telling wasn't just inaccurate. It was deliberate. "You weren't supposed to have proof." Lena stopped walking. The hallway stretched ahead of her. Elevators at one end, an exit sign glowing red at the other. Marisol waiting somewhere near the stairs. And behind her, Tanya's voice, raw and uneven, saying something that rearranged everything. Lena turned around slowly. "What did you just say?" Tanya's face was wet now, but her expression had shifted again. The grief curtain pulling back just enough to reveal something harder underneath. Something older. The real thing. "I filed the suit because I thought you'd just react," Tanya said, her voice still shaking but sharper now, more controlled. "I thought you'd get angry, send me a long text, tell all our friends how unreasonable I was. I thought it would be messy and emotional, and I could point to all of that and say, 'See? This is what I've been dealing with. This is why I had to leave. She's unstable. She's bitter. She can't move on.'" She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Her voice dropped. "I didn't think you'd keep receipts." The words hung in the air. And then, piece by piece, the shape of it became visible to Lena. The architecture of what Tanya had actually been doing. The lawsuit was never about Rufus. It was never about shared custody or a continuous emotional bond or any of the phrases Tanya had typed into her petition. The lawsuit was a performance, and the audience was not the judge. The audience was the blonde woman, and Tanya's friends, and whoever else had been listening to the story Tanya had been telling for over a year. The story where she was the victim of an unreasonable ex who had taken the dog and pushed her out and refused to cooperate. Tanya had expected chaos. She had expected accusations and tears and a drawn-out battle that would make Lena look unhinged. She had filed the suit knowing it would provoke a reaction, and she'd been counting on that reaction to prove everything she'd been saying. What she had not expected was a binder. She had not expected Lena to document everything. She had not expected vet records and receipts and texts organized by date. She had not expected to walk into a courtroom and discover that the person she had been calling unstable for a year had been quietly, methodically building a case that would take 12 minutes to destroy her. "You used him," Lena said. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the hallway. "You used Rufus. After you abandoned him. After you ignored him when he was sick. After he died without you even knowing. You used his name to make yourself look like the wronged party to your new girlfriend and your friends. And you filed a lawsuit. You stood in a courtroom and lied to a judge because you needed me to look crazy." Tanya's jaw tightened. "I needed people to believe me." "About what?" "About you." The words came out fast, almost involuntary, like something that had been bottled up for a long time. "About why I left. About why I was with someone new so fast. About why I—" She stopped, swallowed. "I told everyone you were impossible, that you'd made my life unbearable, that you used Rufus to control me. And I needed it to stay true. Because if it wasn't true, then what did I do?" Lena stood very still, because here it was, the thing underneath the thing. Tanya hadn't just rewritten the story to avoid looking bad. She'd rewritten it to avoid looking at herself. She had left a 4-year relationship abruptly. She had moved on quickly. She had told a new partner an edited version of events in which she was blameless. And to keep that version intact, she had to keep painting Lena as the villain. Even after Lena had done nothing but take care of a dying dog and pay her bills and grieve quietly on her own. The lawsuit was supposed to be the final brushstroke, the public proof that Lena was unreasonable, bitter, impossible to deal with. Tanya had filed it assuming Lena would respond emotionally, and when she didn't, when she responded with a 4-pound binder full of documented facts, the entire story collapsed. "You didn't even check if he was alive," Lena said. "You were so focused on making me look bad that it never occurred to you the dog might already be gone." Tanya didn't answer. "His ashes are in a box on my bookshelf," Lena continued, and her voice was not cruel, was not even angry, was simply tired, the way truth-telling is tired, the way you sound when you have carried something heavy for too long and are finally setting it down. "He weighed 18 pounds at the end. He used to weigh 32. You wouldn't have recognized him." Tanya's face did something that was almost pain and almost shame, and not quite either. "You could have told me. You could have asked." The words landed, and this time Tanya had nowhere to put them. No story to reach for. No version of events where she was right and Lena was wrong. Just the truth, sitting in the fluorescent-lit hallway between them like a third person who had been there all along. Lena turned and walked toward the elevators. She didn't look back. But the binder was still heavy under her arm, and as she pressed the elevator button and waited for the doors to open, she realized something she hadn't expected. Something about what she'd built, and what she was supposed to do with it now. Because you can't hold on to a binder forever. 3 weeks after the courtroom, Lena took the binder into her backyard and burned it. Not all of it. She kept the adoption paperwork, the one with both their names on it from the shelter 6 years ago. She kept a photo of Rufus from the day they brought him home, his one sideways ear already flopping, his eyes bright and trusting. She kept the small wooden box on her bookshelf, but the binder, the receipts, the vet records, the printed text messages organized by date, the notarized affidavit from the specialist, the final invoice with his weight at intake. She carried it out to the fire pit her brother had helped her build the summer before Rufus got sick, and she watched the pages curl and blacken until there was nothing left but ash. Her sister Marisol thought she was crazy. "After all that work, you're just going to destroy it?" But Lena understood something Marisol didn't. The binder had never been for the judge. It had never been for Tanya. It had been for Lena, for the version of her who had spent months wondering if she was overreacting,
if she was being unfair, if the story Tanya was telling about her might be true. The binder was the answer to a question she hadn't known how to ask out loud. Did this happen? Was it as bad as it felt? Am I allowed to be angry? Here is what the binder proved in the end. Not that Tanya was a monster. She wasn't. She was a person who had done a selfish, cowardly thing and then built a story around it to protect herself from her own guilt. That's not villainy. That's just the thing people do when they can't face what they've done. But the binder proved something else, something that mattered more. Lena was not crazy. She had not imagined the neglect. She had not exaggerated the abandonment. She had not been unreasonable, bitter, or impossible. She had been a person who loved a dog and did everything she could to save him. And when the person who was supposed to help her disappeared, she did it alone. And she had the receipts to prove it. Not just to a judge, but to herself. That's what the binder was. Not a weapon, a mirror. You have to understand something about people like Tanya. They don't set out to be the villain of your story. They don't wake up in the morning and think, how can I gaslight someone today? They do something small at first. A justification, a convenient omission, a version of events that makes them slightly less culpable. Then they tell that version to someone else. Then they tell it again. And each time they tell it, the story becomes more real to them, until they genuinely cannot remember what actually happened. By the time Tanya filed the lawsuit, she wasn't lying in the way we usually think of lying. She had told herself the story of the wronged ex so many times that she believed it. She had convinced herself that Lena was keeping Rufus from her, because the alternative, admitting she had abandoned a dog she once loved, ignored him while he was dying, and then used his name to manipulate her new partner, was unbearable. So she didn't bear it. She rewrote it. And for a long time, Lena had no way to fight back. Because how do you argue with a story? How do you prove that someone's version of events is false when the only evidence is your word against theirs? You keep receipts. You save the text messages. You hold on to the vet bills. You print the emails. You document everything. Not because you're bitter, not because you're petty, but because someday you might need to look at a stack of paper and say to yourself, this is what happened. I have proof. I'm not imagining it. The binder was Lena's proof. And once she knew, really knew, that she had it, she didn't need it anymore. That's the thing about documentation. The people who accuse you of being petty for keeping receipts are usually the same people who benefit from no one keeping them. They want the story to stay blurry. They want your memory to be uncertain. They want you to doubt yourself just enough that you don't push back. Tanya wanted Lena to doubt herself, and for a while, she did. But the binder changed that. The binder said, you are not confused. You are not overreacting. This is what happened. And now that Lena knew that, now that she had stood in a courtroom and watched a judge dismiss the case in 12 minutes, the binder had done its job. It could go. The ashes in the fire pit were just paper. The truth was still there. Hani leans in now, her voice quiet but steady. The voice of someone who has walked a version of this road and knows where the potholes are. Here's what I want you to take from this. Not every battle is yours to fight forever. Lena could have kept the binder. She could have laminated every page and stored it in a safe deposit box and pulled it out every time she doubted herself. But that's not freedom. That's just a different kind of prison. Trading the prison of self-doubt for the prison of needing to prove yourself over and over again. Lena won. Not because she humiliated Tanya, not because she got the case dismissed. She won because she reached a point where she didn't need Tanya to understand anymore. She didn't need an apology. She didn't need the story to be corrected in everyone else's mind. She knew what happened. That was enough.
And if you're sitting there right now and you've got your own version of the binder, the text messages you've saved, the conversations you've replayed, the evidence you've gathered to prove to yourself that you're not crazy, here's what I want you to hear. You're not crazy. You were never crazy. And one day, you're going to be able to burn the binder too. Not yet, maybe. Not today. But the binder is not your life. It's just the thing that helped you find your way back to yourself. And once you're there, once you're really there, you get to let it go.
If this episode meant something to you, I want you to do one thing for me. Think of someone who's been made to feel like they're overreacting, like they're the problem, like they need to just move on already. Send them this video. Not with a long explanation, just send it. They'll know why. And if you're new here, if this is the first time you've found wettedy, hit subscribe. This is what we do. We slow it down. We look at the patterns. We stop letting the story be told to us and start seeing what's actually there. The next episode is already waiting for you. It's about a woman who recorded her sister's apology and what the recording captured that no one expected. Click the video on your screen right now. I'll see you there. People always show you who they are. wettedy just slows it down.